Welcome to the show, guys. I've got an exciting guest. I've got the Colts beat writer today. What's going on, George? How do I pronounce it? George Bremer, right?
Yes, very good. And not many people get that on the first try, so I'm impressed.
I'm not good at this at all with the pronunciation with names, and I tend to call players by different names. Like you got Rudy Gobert, I call him Rudy Gobert. So I change names around a lot and have some fun with it. So welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited. Today we're talking about the Colts. Obviously, there's a lot of questions to be had considering from a fantasy perspective and an outlook. I'm being a Colts fan, obviously not as diehard or in tune as you. I want to know a little bit about kind of the outlook. We're going to talk some fantasy relevance, some volume, obviously some changes with Matt Ryan under center. It's going to be exciting. Some O-line moves. How good is the O-line this year? Is there improvements? Jonathan Taylor. So many questions to dive into. First and foremost, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? I wanted to learn about you, kind of what you do, how you got into it, and kind of your background. Because, again, everyone knows you're a beat writer. They got the name. They can look you up on Twitter, but I wanted to hear it from you. I like to hear people's stories.
Yeah, no, it's been a long run. Started with Colts during training camp in 2010 when they came here to Anderson, where I'm based. And then it kind of grew organically from there. 2012 was the first season that I was with team for the whole year. And so, it's been an interesting run since then. We had a few things happen in Indianapolis in the last 10 years. So never dull. There's never a dull moment around here. And I think it's a franchise that is, the last 5 years almost perpetually in transition. I mean, you've got a new quarterback again every year. I don't know if I've seen anything quite like this in the league where it's almost like a college team. Like, the guy the year before graduates and now it's the next man up.
Yeah, are you happy about the Matt Ryan? I think, again, I was thinking about Matt Ryan. I'm a fan of him. I didn't think he had it good as Atlanta last year. Obviously, O-line issues, always under pressure. Just, I don't know if he's lost his passion there. If I were to pick a home for Matt Ryan to think that he could thrive, I think Indy would be it. Do you agree? Is this a good home for Matt Ryan? Can he really thrive there from fantasy and reality perspective?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, these two needed each other. The Colts needed Matt Ryan. And Matt Ryan needed the Colts. And I think it's a good fit. So far, everybody you talk to in that building is utterly impressed with them, which, I mean, honestly is the case pretty much every year, everywhere you go. But there's just been such a huge change over there in terms of engagement from the quarterback. He's out there on the field coaching wide receivers during practice, and he's something that he's got the resume to do. I mean, when he comes up to one of these guys, their oldest wide receiver is 25. So It's an extremely young group. When he comes up there with 14 years of experience, an MVP, a Super Bowl appearance, it carries a lot of weight. I think the moment he walked in the locker room, he had the attention of a lot of these kids.
Right. So I'm hearing Frank Wright was saying, I was reading reports, and he's looking really accurate. Now, is that to say, like, are the wide receivers being defended well? Or is he just throwing, like, when they say he's looking accurate, are the corners doing their job, or is he just throwing it in the sky and making passes without any proper defense? Like, what do they mean by that?
Yeah, it's been pretty. Now, obviously, there was a period there where we were only there one day a week. So the other practices we didn't see, and maybe things were completely different than they were the one that we did see. But every time we've been out there, it's probably the most obvious thing about him. The ball is just where it's supposed to be on almost every pass, when it's supposed to be there. And the coverage doesn't matter. I've seen him throw it right over defenders' outstretched hands. I've seen him throw it right over defenders' helmets. A couple times he's thrown a guy open. It's just the ball is always on time. And I think the players are the ones that Frank Reich has mentioned it, but it's usually the first thing out of the player's mouth when they come out to meet the media. And you say, what's different about this quarterback than the last four? And they'll immediately say the ball's on you right away, and it's right where it should be. And it's been plainly obvious. I mean, it's probably the number one takeaway for anyone who's seen practice so far.
Now, I won't hold you to this, obviously. I just got to ask you, projected stat line for Matt Ryan. I mean, this is a total wild out there. I think, again, in regards to fantasy, he's literally sitting like 20th amongst quarterbacks. He's going undrafted. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. I think his touchdowns are going to be up. I think this yardage is going to be just over 4,000, maybe more. So my question is stat line and what type of balance? Do you think there's going to be more throwing or do you think there's going to be more running? Because we're going to get to Jonathan Taylor in a second. But is there going to be a lot of volume, the same volume we saw years ago in Atlanta with Matt Ryan throwing the ball this year? And can you give us a projected stat line, please?
Yeah, I don't think you'll see what you saw in Atlanta. I think that they're going to run the ball a lot. I don't think it's going to be more run than pass, but it might be like 55-45 or something in that neighborhood, depending on how hot Jonathan Taylor gets again and depending on how defenses want to play them. I think that's one of the things that they want to do now is be a pick your poison team. You know, if they come out and it's a good run look, they're going to give the ball to Taylor. But if defenses do what they did last year and load the box against Jonathan, I think they're going to be more willing to throw the ball now because I think they feel like Matt Ryan's going to take advantage of those situations. The baseline to me, like the bottom, projection would be where Phillip Rivers was at in 2020. I mean, you got to start there. I think Ryan's got more arm strength at this point in his career than Rivers did. He might not have, what he did at his peak, but that's never really been his number one kind of area to begin with. He's always been more of a timing guy, and that's a perfect fit with this offense. I mean, that's what Frank Reich does. Crossers, intermediate throws, and then when you get a shot, you take it. I think the numbers will be good. I agree with you there. I think north of 4,000 yards. I would think north of 30 touchdowns is going to be an expectation. But I don't think it's going to go crazy. I think this is going to still be a balanced offense.
For sure. And in regards to O-line, any improvements? Will he have time to throw in regards to Matt Ryan? Will he be under a lot of pressure? How does the O-line feel? How do they look health-wise? And how is this going to play out for Jonathan Taylor? Are they going to create enough holes for him this year? Are you confident in a robust O-line this year? Are they solid again?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, obviously, I haven't done anything yet because most of OTAs was 7-on-7 work. And when they did go in 11-on-11, it was walkthrough speed. So you can't really see anything yet from the linemen. They're healthier. And I think that's a big start right there. I mean, last year, Ryan Kelly missed a lot of time. And when he was out there, he was dealing with he had like an elbow issue in training camp that I don't think ever fully healed. Quentin Nelson, of course, went through all sorts of injuries and issues last year, and he's back fully participating. There's no limitations on him. Even Braden Smith had issues starting in training camp. Those are your anchors, those three guys. And I think the fact that they're back healthy is that right there will be a big step forward. Right. The question mark is right guard and left tackle. Right now, it looks like Danny Pinner is going to take over at right guard. They have really high expectations on him. He did a really good job last year filling in for Kelly, but he's never played right guard before. So, we'll see how that goes. By all accounts, he's a really smart guy. He fits their sort of bully mentality on the line. He's really physical. We'll just have to wait for games to start to kind of see how that plays out. And then, of course, the left tackle competition is really going to be one to watch. Matt Pryor's getting the first crack there. Excuse me. Did a great job last year as a swing tackle, but now you're going to take over on the left side, and obviously it's a totally different world.
Right.
And then you've got Bernard Raymond, who's the third-round rookie, who's going to be in this mix. And I think in a lot of ways, it would be best for the team if Raymond wins that job. And that's not a slight on Pryor. I just think if Raymond wins that job, you can move Pryor back into the role he had last year as a utility guy. He could play all four spots outside of center, and then you're going to be able to have a lot more, utility with that line. Dennis Kelly can slot in as the swing tackle. I just think if you can put a lie detector test to him, that's the outcome they probably most want. But the rookie's got to go out there and win the job. It won't be handed to him.
Right. From a fantasy perspective, that's a lot of depth analysis, and I appreciate that. From a fantasy head, we're just thinking, is Jonathan Taylor going to have room to run, and is Matt Ryan going to be protected? But that's good to get that insight. So to answer those questions, it sounds like they're good. They're good. They're better. They're healthier, which is kind of what we're looking for from a fantasy perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's all we can tell right now is really that health factor, and it's a long way step forward from where it was a year ago. I think that had as much to do with them taking a step back last year as anything. It's just your key guys weren't out there. That's not going to help anyone.
All right, I want to switch over to probably arguably the number one fantasy football draft pick this year in fantasy is Jonathan Taylor, coming off a phenomenal year. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the last time any fantasy running back has finished on top again in fantasy points was like 2002, 2003 with Priest Holmes. So it's very unlikely historically that Taylor's going to perform on this level. So I'm factoring in a decline. I'm factoring in, 332 attempts, 1,811 yards. You know the numbers, 18 touchdowns. I just don't see that. So I know there's going to be decline. If you agree with me that there's going to be a decline, my question to you is, if you do agree or if you don't agree, what would the decline be? And if you don't agree, what would the incline be? How much more of a ceiling is left for Taylor? Can I just get your feedback on expectations for Taylor? Now, let's be realistic here. They brought in Philip Lindsay. So another big question is, I call these people fantasy football pests because they're going to be there only to take away volume from our Jonathan Taylor, our workhorses. Is Lindsay going to be a thorn in the side of Taylor production, up or down? I'll let you talk on this, but those are kind of my questions here for Taylor.
I don't think Lindsay will be a thorn unless Taylor gets hurt. I think that's what he's here for. I think he's going to be that guy. If Taylor's healthy, then Nyheim Hines is the number 2 guy, and they're going to use him very similar to how they have in the past, rotate him in certain packages, and then he's the guy that catches the ball out of the backfield. That's what he does as well as anyone.
Right.
And I know that they've really highlighted him a lot, but I think a lot of that has to do with the quarterback change. Matt Ryan's going to look to that check down. He's going to look to the running back a lot more. You look at when Hines was with Andrew Luck and when he was with Phillip Rivers, and his numbers were soaring. When it's with Jacoby Brissett and Carson Wentz, they were down. I think Matt Ryan's more in that Luck Rivers mode, and I think you'll see his numbers go back up. But I don't think he's going to be on the field much more than he has been in the past. I just think his opportunities are going to be more when he is out there. I don't see how Taylor doesn't have a decline, honestly. He was the offense for the last 8-9 weeks last year. That's not going to be the case. If it is, something's gone terribly wrong this year. They're going to throw the ball more than they did a year ago. And I think that alone is going to put the numbers down. He's not going to have as many opportunities. What does that look like? Probably still 1,400 yards or somewhere in that neighborhood. I think that's who he is. And he's still going to run the ball a lot. But like you said, 332 carries that's a pretty hefty load. I don't think you're going to see that again. There'll be games like that. They're undoubtedly somebody wants to come out and put 7 or 8 guys in the box all day. They'll give them 35 carries, but I don't think they're not going to force it the way they did a year ago.
Why I'm looking at it here because week 11, 32, and then he went back to 16 attempts, then back to 32, 29, 27. What signified that spike, week 11 to 32? Why was he getting more, would you say, all of a sudden after week 11?
The passing game was just breaking down. I don't think they had a lot of options there. Whatever the factor was, the line was not protecting as well as it should. The receivers were not getting open as much as they should. The quarterback wasn't making the kind of reads that he should. Every element of that passing game was a factor, and it was not a good factor. And, they just got to a point. You go back to the New England game, they've got, I think it was 3rd down. And even after the game, Frank Reich said he knew he probably should throw the ball, but he felt like, let's take one more crack with the running game. And then, Taylor breaks a long run and seals the win. But 30 other teams in that situation are going to throw the ball. And the Colts were just at a point where it wasn't a viable option. I don't know how else to put it. It was almost like Woody Hayes said, throw the ball and 3 things are going to happen. 2 of them are bad. They kind of were at that point at the end of last year.
Yeah, interesting. Week 13 to 17, 4 consecutive 100+ yard rushing games. Pretty impressive. I don't know how sustainable that is or if he's going to keep that going this year. Again, we're factoring in a decline here. We just got to figure out how much. And again, is he a guy? He looks healthy. There's, knock on wood, doesn't seem to be any issues. Do you think, anything can happen with running backs, but health-wise, he looks like if anyone's going to do it again, it could be Taylor, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think from a physical standpoint, he's there. They held him out of minicamp, I think mostly because why not? You just mentioned how much work you got a year ago, and if you can rest his legs, then rest his legs. I don't personally care if he takes a preseason snap. I don't think anybody does from that standpoint. Physically, this is a guy who really works at that too. I mean, he talks about prehab all the time. He's big on yoga. Every offseason, he kind of tries to find a different way to kind of train. And, he wants to make sure that he's in the best possible shape. All players do. But in Taylor's case, it's a real focus. It's a real intentional thing, trying to make sure that he's physically as good as he can be every season. And so far, I mean, 2 years into his career, it seems to be working really well. He's incredibly consistent. He's got really good power. He's got speed. He's got every tool that you want. So if there was a guy who could do it, I definitely think Jonathan Taylor's that guy. I just think the offense is going to change so much. He's not going to have the opportunity.
Okay, this is going to be interesting to see because, again, I'm factoring in a decline. For me, that decline puts Henry ahead of Taylor in regards to fantasy, because I still think if you look at Derrick Henry's numbers, you got to look at he only played 8 games, and he was number 10, top 10 in attempts, rushing attempts, top 10 in touchdowns, and rushing yards. He only played 8 games. So I'm factoring in a bigger ceiling for Henry this year. Again, I don't know. We're going to have to figure out what the decline is. I'm hoping Taylor has that good year. So again, still a top 5 pick in fantasy. It just matters what the decline is. I want to shift over here because there's a lot of questions here with wide receiver. Again, for me, just so we haven't talked before. So by the way, everybody, this is our first time meeting here, George and I got to tell you, I don't know if you know much about me, but I'm the game changer in fantasy football. This isn't a bragging about Joe show. This is about, I think outside the box. I'm very intuitive on my predictions on people that can emerge based on talent, opportunity, the volume they're going to get, where they are on the depth chart. So I'm looking at the wide receiver core. And again, we won't hold you to it. I won't, if you say, I'm not saying anything bad, but I'm a realist here. I don't know if Michael Pittman is a true wide receiver one. We have the same situation going on right now in Chicago, Darnell Mooney. Good receivers, are they Jamar Chase? Let's be realistic. Probably not. So my question is Alec, I got a bunch of questions here. Let's just dive into it. And let me kind of explain the whole thing. You could dive in. Michael Pittman, that's my first question. Is he the true one? I don't know. His average draft position right now for fantasy is like 3rd, 4th round. I think that's a bit expensive. Paris Campbell is that guy, good receiver, like he's in the NFL, but I have this saying called years to wow me, and guess what? I'm not wowed. I'm not expecting anything out of him. Who excites me, and he's like ranked 100th on the consensus rankings, totally being slept on, Alec Pierce, man. I'm thinking this guy looks good out of college. Matt Ryan throws a ton. He's in a prime position to get that volume and become a very viable receiver. So my question to you, is Pittman going to be a true wide receiver one? Can Alec Pierce maybe take that wide receiver one spot from him? Is he that good? Can he surpass him? Like, what's the situation? How does this all play out in your prediction here? How's it going in camp?
Yeah, Pittman's the top guy here. I mean, I don't know if you look across the league, I don't know how many guys there are that are like true number ones right now. I mean, maybe 10.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's in that group, but he's definitely the top guy here. He's the leader of this group. I think he's gonna have a big year. Him and Matt Ryan already have some connection out there. I think Matt Ryan likes to throw to big receivers. I don't know a quarterback that doesn't, honestly. I mean, people talk about that, but I don't know there's a quarterback out there that doesn't like to throw to big receivers. And Pittman's shown when he gets the ball in rhythm and he gets it, in phase, his run after catch ability is pretty special. And I think that's something you're going to see more from him again. I go back to his rookie year, the game they played at Tennessee, and then the playoff game against Buffalo. His run after the catch was phenomenal, and it really was a lot of hidden yardage in that game for that offense. And I think Matt Ryan's going to put him back in that zone where he's going to be able to show those skills again. I mean, his dad was a running back, and you see it when the ball's in his hands. He runs angry. I mean, I've never seen a receiver quite like that before.
Right.
But I also think Matt Ryan's going to spread the ball around. I mean, that's his career has shown that. I think he's going to go to a lot of different people. Paris Campbell, the question with him is always health. He hasn't had anywhere near a healthy season yet, which was strange because he had no major injury at Ohio State. His first significant surgery was his rookie year here, and now he's had one every year. And it's freak stuff. I mean, if it was soft tissue stuff, it'd be a different conversation. If it was like groin pulls and hamstrings and things like this year after year, one year a guy hit his knee with his helmet. I don't know how you avoid that. Last year, he scores a touchdown and someone falls on the back of his foot at such an angle that it breaks his foot. Like
Right.
it's freakish kind of incidents. And the thing about him that I think from a fantasy standpoint makes him so frustrating for players, if he's healthy, he's a perfect fit for this offense. What he wants to do, what Matt Ryan wants to do, that timing offense, the underneath throws, the run after catch, it's Paris Campbell's skill set. And you go out there now in 7-on-7, you see it. He looks like a major element. But is he going to be there week 14? Is he going to be there week 12? That to me, that's the risk with him. If you could get a real steal if he stays on the field, he could definitely be the solid number 2 on this team. And I think with Matt Ryan, that's going to be a pretty productive guy. But will he stay on the field? And his history says no. So I think that's the gamble with this offense right now. If you're looking at these skill guys, Pierce, it'll be interesting to see. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think he's got a lot of upside. And I think Matt Ryan's going to get him there really fast. Kyle Pitts was obviously a freak of nature. But if you look at his rookie year last year as a tight end, there aren't many guys who have those kind of numbers. And a lot of that's Pitts, obviously, as a rookie, but a lot of it also, I think, is Matt Ryan. Like I think he's going to get Alec Pierce to whatever ceiling Alec Pierce has this year. He's got some things he needs to work on. Can he get off press coverage? All the young guys need to see that right away.
Right.
But I don't think he's going to be the focal point of defenses early either. And I don't think Matt Ryan's going to force anything. So I think there's going to be opportunities for him. And I think he's another guy that could be, especially if Campbell goes down and they don't bring in a veteran, then Pierce is the obvious number 2 guy. I mean, I don't think there's anybody else after those 3 that you feel real confident in. Could Ashton Doolin be a breakout guy? Maybe. Could Des Patman be a breakout guy? Maybe. Could Mike Strong be a breakout guy? But there isn't anybody else that's ever done it in the league or that you have really strong convictions on. So after that, I think it goes into the tight end slots. Mo Alley-Cox is probably going to be the top guy there, but both Jelani Woods and Alec Ogletree, the 2 rookies who are just gargantuan. I think they're 6'8", 6'7", huge guys.
Woods is a sleeper. Is he he looks like a giant? Like, is he going to be the next Travis Kelce? Like, is he going to Gronkowski this thing, or is Mo Alley-Cox going to be the guy, or is Woods going to be the guy at tight end? That's going to be interesting.
I think Mo Alley-Cox will be the guy early.
Really?
Just because he's the only one who's done it. I mean, he's the only guy who's been in this offense, who's played in the league, and they really like him. And we'll see. He's another guy who needs to take a step forward. The production's not been there, but he's had Jack Doyle, he's had Eric Ebron, he's had other guys in front of him. I think he'll be the guy, but I don't think it's going to be he's not going to get 80% of the production right now. I think it's going to be a really split group over there. And both Ogletree and Woods, they're intriguing. If nothing else, just to snipe touchdowns. I mean, you get down in the red zone, they can put some trees out there. You have a Pierce, Pittman, Alley-Cox, and then either Woods or Ogletree out there. That's a huge lineup. And I just go back to 2018 when Eric Ebron was here with Andrew Luck and he had a 13 touchdown season. Tight ends, I don't know any one of them is going to do that because that's a crazy number. But the tight ends as a group, I think, are going to see a lot of opportunities down there.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this offense. I got Woods as a sleeper at tight end, and I was just looking at Paris Campbell's numbers. I'm not excited about him at all. Now I'm looked at, he started 15 games in 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. That's really 7, 2, and 6 over 2019, 20, and 2020, 21. So I have zero expectations for that guy, zero. So that's why Alec Pierce just really jumps out at me as a guy that could do well. I mean, would you target? I mean, you don't play fantasy now, right? Because you're a beat writer. It's you can't play or whatever. But Alec Pierce, you think that guy's got some upside though? Overall, what do you think a stat line on a high end for Pierce would be? What do you see as a ceiling? If he goes off, has some astronomical year. Remember, Matt Ryan throws a lot, right? I don't know what the run game might be different here, but what do you see for a stat line for Alec Pierce? Because again, I got him as a deep stash, just on my bench, hope for a prayer type thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's got so much raw ability, and I think that's one of the things that excites everybody. I mean, his athleticism's off the charts. I mean, you look at his RAS and some of these things, it's it's really elite. You know, I mean, there isn't much he doesn't do well from an explosion standpoint. You know, his speed is top end. He's got good size.
Deep threat too, right? I mean, he's a deep threat as well, is he not? One of the
I
big
think that's what he's here for. I
deep
really
pass.
do. I
One of the
mean,
best guys out of the class.
and you look at the rest of that group, Doolin in very very limited reps has done it once or twice. Again, if Campbell's on the field, he's done it once or twice. But I think that Pierce is your deep guy here. That's not Michael Pittman's game. He can do it, but again, it's more run after the catch with him. He's not going to be the guy that runs past the defense off the line of scrimmage. I think Alec Pierce is. I think that's what he's here for. I really think it's to stretch the defense, take the top off. So, I think for him, it's going to be a matter of how often does that come from Matt Ryan. I think he's going to be looking underneath a lot. And I think this offense is going to be, it's not going to be nickel and dime, but it's going to be that timing, quick, get the ball out, crossers, those kind of things. But when they get big shots, I think as often as not, it's going to be Alec Pierce that's going to be the guy. Conservatively, probably somewhere on the high end years for Zach Pascal, 40, 50 catches, 600, 700 yards. I think somewhere in that neighborhood is where you could probably, hope for Alec Pierce to be.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are sleeping on the offense because on paper, when I look at the receivers, it doesn't excite me, right? Because you haven't seen much. Taylor, you just think Taylor when you think Colts. And I think Matt Ryan, everybody buys that recency bias because he didn't have a good year last year with Atlanta. They think, oh, well, Matt Ryan just sucks. It's not the case. I think Matt Ryan's really good. I think he was kind of sick of being where he was and just getting all that pressure, and that offense looked terrible over the past couple of years. So I think he just wanted to get out. And the thing that's funny, here's what's funny is that the mainstream and the consensus for fantasy football, they look at it as like if Calvin, like they loved Julio and Calvin Ridley years ago with Ryan. Now all of a sudden Pittman and Pierce aren't a big factor, and Matt Ryan is chopped liver. Like it's still Matt Ryan. The O-line's good. They got a good running game. I'm just excited about this offense. I think this is a team that I'll be watching every single week to see what happens. It's going to be, they got some exciting pieces in play. Now, in regards to outlook division, their division doesn't look too strong. Jacksonville I don't know what they're doing this year, man. Trevor Lawrence, such a high draft capital. They brought in Christian Kirk and gave him they paid him a bazillion dollars or something like that is the exact number. Division wise, where do the Colts finish? Maybe number one, or who do you think can rival them? Because Davis Mills with Houston, like that doesn't attract. That's not appealing at all.
No, I think it's going to be the Colts and Tennessee again. I mean, that's the way it's been the last couple of years. I think it's going to be the same way. You wonder about the Titans after losing A.J. Brown. That's going to be an interesting situation over there. He's absolutely killed the Colts. He's killed everybody the last 2 years. I'm just interested to see where that offense is now. We know they have Derrick Henry, and we know they're going to run the ball first anyway. But can they make enough plays in the passing game to keep up in the modern, what the NFL has become? That's the question with Tennessee. I don't know. I mean, one thing I don't count out Mike Vrabel. I think every year the Titans have been probably the best version that they could be of themselves that he's been there. And I imagine he's going to have them right back in the mix this year. So the Colts have to prove they can beat the Titans. And I think that's the big question. On paper, this looks like a really good chance. I mean, they've got a lot of pieces in place, but I think Tennessee's won 3 of the last 4 and maybe 6 of the last 8. And until you beat that team, you can't be the team to beat in the division.
Well, the way my mind thinks, I look at quarterbacks in my mind as tiers, and it's pretty common sense. Matt Ryan is that guy who's above par that can actually get him to the Super Bowl. He's done it. Like he can get him deep into the playoffs. I don't know if he's got what it takes to win the whole thing, but he can really get him deep into the playoffs. I look at Tannehill as a guy that's like the little engine that could barely could. I think he's like par, like he's just kind of right there. He's never that guy that's going to win him the whole thing. So when it comes down to again, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the offenses look pretty par when it comes to run game. Wide receivers, maybe the edge to the Colts when I'm just looking at it on paper, but I think the factor will be the quarterback. That's where either it's going to be Tannehill or Ryan. I think Ryan edges him out there. Defensively, though, that's where I'm not as probably solid as you. How do the Colts look defensively for this year in comparison to Titans?
That's going to be real interesting to keep an eye on it. Again, it's hard to tell right now because there's just not much going on. But You bring in Unique Ngakoue, and I think that's a huge. That's going to be the guy for this defense. He's been an 8 to 12 sack guy every year that he's been in the league. If you throw 12 more sacks into last year's defense, I think it changes things significantly for that football team. Does Baltimore come back on them the way they did? You know, a lot of these leads that they lost late in games last year. If you've got Unique Ngakoue out there, is the outcome different? I don't know. It's a hypothetical, and it's one of the things that we're going to keep an eye on. Does he push Kwity Paye to that next level? You know, he had up and down rookie years, seemed like he was coming on towards the end, but he was also being asked as a rookie to be the primary pass rusher. You know, he was the guy that teams were, if they were focusing on anybody, it was Kwity Paye. That's tough to do when your first year in the league, obviously. And I think Ngakoue being here is going to help with that. He's got a long history with Gus Bradley and a very successful history with Gus Bradley. That wide 9 spot seems perfectly suited for him. And like I said, he's been one of the most consistent guys in the league since he got here. You know, it's 8 to 12 sacks every year. So I think can he go out there, put up his usual numbers and change this pass rush for Indianapolis? Because the defensive scheme is different, but it's not like it's overhauled. You know, it's not, there are things that Gus Bradley's going to do that are different from what Matt Eberflus did the last 4 years, but the base of it is still similar. You know, it's a cousin of the cover 2 defense. It's a cover 3. You know, it's not like they've thrown out everything and started from scratch. But I think Ngakoue is going to be one huge indicator. The other two, Darius Leonard's health. You know, last year he wasn't himself, and he was the first to say it. That ankle bothered him all year long. You could see it. He didn't have his mobility. He didn't fly around the way he usually did, but he still found a way to make plays. He caused turnovers at a ridiculous rate. If he's healthy, that changes this defense a lot. Bobby Okereke is in a contract year. You know, he had a rough start last year, good finish. We'll see if he can do it, you know, for a full 17 games. And then the other big addition and the other guy to keep an eye on is Stephon Gilmore. And it's much like Matt Ryan. Once he got left in the tank, coming off an injury year for him, which is different than Ryan. Ryan hasn't missed much time at all throughout his career. But, you know, can he be healthy? And if you go back through Gus Bradley's history, older corners have done really well in his defense. For whatever reason, it seems to suit these guys. Gilmore's come in and said that he feels like he's a really good fit. To me, those two in particular, Ngakoue and Gilmore, they're going to define how this defense goes. If they can play at something similar to what they've been at for most of their careers, then defense will take a step forward. If they don't, you know, they don't look like themselves, especially in Gilmore's case, then it could struggle again.
Couple more quick things here. I'm just looking at Colts did their job with the corners. They had 19, their 4th interceptions last year with 19. I'm seeing here 138. Let me see their fantasies. There were actually fantasy points last year. They were 7th in fantasy points on defense and special teams combined, but their sacks weren't that good last year. When I look at the sacks, they only had 33 sacks as a team, I believe, putting them 25th amongst teams. So are they going to put pressure on quarterbacks a little bit more this year, you think?
It really comes down to Ngakoue. You know, last year they didn't have that guy. They didn't have that veteran leader. And I think that was one of the big sort of head scratchers coming into the season because Chris Ballard had done so much elsewhere with this roster. And then they kind of just relied on 2 rookies, one of whom was coming off a torn Achilles in Dayo Odeyingbo for the pass rush. And it just never really developed. And I think this year, you know, having Ngakoue, having Paye and Odeyingbo on their second years, you never know, but I do think the pass rush will be better just because I think the guy Ngakoue might help the most is DeForest Buckner because he's just been swamped because there hasn't been any reason really to worry as much about the edge. And if Ngakoue can be a consistent threat out there, it's going to open things up for DeForest Buckner, and then I think everything changes.
All right, 2 more questions here. Frank Wright said 2 more quick things. Frank Wright basically said that I think I read this somewhere. I could be wrong. I don't want to misquote it. Something along, if he was a fantasy owner, he'd get Naheem Hines. Should we be concerned by that threat? I don't know.
I think he's talking about how much he wants to use him. I mean, Hines is such a versatile guy, and I think they're trying. Last year, he had like 36 catches or something like that. Might have been a little more than that. but you've seen him up in the 60s with Luck and with Rivers, and I think that's what they're talking about. I think he's going to be much more involved in the passing game than he was a year ago. And then when you add in what he can do as a running back, and he's always been the hurry up running back. I don't think that's going to change. They're in a 2-minute drill. Naeem Hines is out there. So, he gets his opportunities. Last year, he probably had his best, definitely had his best per carry season. But I don't know how much I buy into that as far as him being like a fantasy threat, maybe a flex guy, but he's not. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's the bell cow here. That's not changing.
That's what I'm thinking. And then the last thing, I don't know what you can reveal, but is there any inside information that may not be on the news that I wouldn't know that you're hearing in camp? There's a buzz that, Matt Ryan ties his shoe with his eyes closed on the side. I don't know. I'm just being stupid here. Is there any information like that we might not know, inside information? Maybe Pittman's looking really good. He's got a special move. I don't know. Is there anything that we don't know that you might know that could help either fantasy owners or just people in general that there's a buzz around? Nothing at all, really?
I don't know there's anything that's like that would be like a bombshell. I mean, one thing that I think, you really want to keep an eye on, it's out there. I mean, people kind of know it. But with Pittman in particular, you look at the explosion on the wide receiver market. I mean, you mentioned Christian Kirk, and that kind of touched it off. And he's a guy that, next year it would be a year that he could come out and demand, a new contract. And I just wonder, how motivated is he in that regard? I mean, again, his dad played 11 years. I think he understands the business side of this league really well. And I think he's not going to be a guy who sells himself short. So, I think it's not the primary focus for him, but I think there's got to be motivation on his side to go out there and put up the kind of numbers to where he can come in and say, hey, give me one of these $20 million a year deals too.
Yeah, he had an okay year last year. Just went over 1,000 yards, only 6 touchdowns. But again, I'm not really sold on. I wasn't sold on the quarterback last year either. I'm not really a Wentz guy, I think
that's the question. I mean, you mentioned at the very top accuracy, and that's all anybody talks about with Matt Ryan right now, and what that does for the receivers in terms of allowing them to make plays after the catch. That's a big part of Mike Pittman's game. I mean, it frankly is. I mean, he gets the ball, and he's got a little space. Like I said, he runs angry. I've never really seen a receiver quite like him in that regard. There's other things that receivers do that are much better than Michael Pittman. But when he has the ball in his hands and he gets ahead of steam, I don't know if there's anybody better than him in that role. And I think Matt Ryan's going to take advantage of that more often. So, to me, he's a guy who should be motivated to put up really big numbers because it could lead to a really big payday for him.
I mean, now you got everybody excited about Michael Pittman. I appreciate that. And last thing here, this is a little bit of an emotional thing for me. Andrew Luck. Okay, were you? How long have you been doing this job now? How many years?
Since his rookie year, 2012.
So I was a big Andrew Luck fan. That's when I really started to get hard. Like I started doing this as a business in 2016, 17 for fantasy, but I really hardcore got into fantasy in 2012, maybe a little bit before that. And Andrew Luck was my guy. I kind of grew up with him in fantasy. So that really broke my heart. What were the real reasons? Do you know the real reasons why someone with that much talent would retire? Is it just, I'm just guessing he wanted to preserve his body. He just didn't want to take a beating and stuff like that. Again, that's the feeling I get from him. He seems like a bookworm, smart, just a nice guy. He doesn't seem like a guy that likes the flashy life. Any inside information on what happened to Luck?
Yeah, you're pretty well on point there. I think at some point when Matt Hasselbeck was here, which we all miss him because he was such a great resource in the locker room for media, he said, Luck doesn't need football. And I think that was always the case with him. It was a different, he was always one of these guys that, Stanford educated, and you just felt like whatever he put his mind to, he could have done. He could have been a banker, a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever. Football was just something that he did, and he did extremely well. But he was always a different kind of superstar. I mean, you mentioned about him being a nice guy. He never wanted the spotlight. He never wanted. He would come out, and if they had a good game, he would praise everybody else on the roster. If they
Yeah.
had a bad game, he would take all the blame for it. He was never a guy who wanted the spotlight, who wanted even, you hear about guys like they get away from the game and they miss the roar of the fans. I don't
Yeah.
know that that was Andrew Luck. And I don't mean to say that like he loved football and he cared deeply. He wouldn't play at the level he did if he didn't. But I don't think he was ever going to be one of these guys that was 44 or 45 and hanging on, trying to set records or, win a ring or whatever it may be. I think he was always going to leave on his own terms. And I think what you said, he's got to a point where he was so banged up. And I don't think he wanted to continue getting like cortisone shots every week and, doing the rehab it takes to get on the field when he was getting to the point where every year, it was something new. He didn't have to do it. And I don't think he wanted to do it anymore. But I think it's a really rare, how many guys are in that position? I don't know how to put that. How many guys make that decision? You know what I mean? It just,
Right.
he was a different breed all along. And I just think it's a once in a lifetime thing. I don't think we'll ever see, in so many ways, I don't think we'll ever see anybody like Andrew Luck again.
That's a signed helmet by Andrew Luck in memory of his career here. You can see his good old signature. So Andrew Luck has once touched this helmet. There you go. Anyway, yeah, that's my Andrew Luck story. I was a big fan. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on, George. Now, as a beat writer, do you meet these? Do you have access to these players? Like as a beat writer, do beat writers in general talk to these players? Can you call up Pittman right now? Or is it that type of relationship with the Colts, or how close are you with the Colts right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a player by player base, man. One of the things that's been tough, and I think you'll hear this from beat writers across the league right now, the last 2 years were so hard because you didn't have locker room. And so you couldn't really build those personal relationships because, if you're on Zoom, it's great. It's great technology, but it's not getting the job done as far as, it's even multiple sources. I mean, all the last 2 years, you had whoever you got during the week on the video conference, and that was it. There's just not been that chance to build that. And so guys like Pittman and Taylor, we're really just meeting them now. If you talk to this beat in particular, it eats everybody up that Philip Rivers was here for a year and we were never in person with him once, just because you hear the stories from everywhere else and how great he is with the media. And he was even in that video conference setting. But you just don't have that chance the last couple of years. And I think that's something that we're all really excited to be able to start doing again.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate you coming on, guys. Thank you. Make sure you follow him. How do we follow you on Twitter? Is George Bremer? Bremer.
At GM Bremer. Yep.
Okay, GM Bremer. Okay, perfect. I appreciate you. Thank you very much for that insight. Very good to hear. And I'm excited to see what the Colts do. This is an offense I'll be watching. And don't sleep on Matt Ryan, Michael Pittman, and Alec Pierce, of course. All right, thank you very much. Everybody, make sure you guys subscribe and go follow George on Twitter. We'll talk soon, guys. Bye-bye.